The calm before the storm. That's exactly how every major turning point in human history begins. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to break down the incredibly fragile architecture of global peace. We look around and we think we're living in a world that's safe, secure, and stable. But the truth, as outlined in our source material, is that our current peace, it's hanging by an unbelievably thin thread of delicate military and economic balances. And today, we're going to look at the exact anatomy of how that thread finally snaps.
It's a pretty terrifying premise, isn't it? How can a single spark burn the entire planet in the 21st century? We all want to believe that our modern systems, our diplomacy, and our highly interconnected economies make us immune to those catastrophic total wars of the past. But to really grasp the mechanics of modern escalation, we kind of have to shatter that illusion of safety. The core question we're answering today is how a localized, seemingly manageable incident can trigger an unstoppable, chronological domino effect that literally engulfs the globe.
So let's peel back the layers of history for a second. There's that old saying, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. If we think back to the physical sparks of the past, in 1914, it was quite literally a single bullet, the assassination of an archduke, that detonated the First World War. Jump to 1939, and it was the massive physical invasion of Poland that kicked off the Second World War. But today, in our era of extreme globalization, the triggers are way more complex and intertwined. The initial spark for a Third World War won't necessarily be some army marching across a physical border. Honestly, it's highly likely to be entirely invisible.
Which brings us to part one, a spark in digital space. Based on current military theory and geopolitical analysis, the next global conflict is probably going to begin in the shadows. Let's break down the psychology of a digital first strike. Just imagine a sudden, completely silent cyber attack that instantly paralyzes the critical infrastructure of a major superpower. The power grids in massive cities just go dark. Hospitals grind to a halt. Communication networks are totally paralyzed. And because there's no immediate smoking gun proof of who actually pushed the button, the world enters this incredibly dangerous phase of strategic doubt. Fingers immediately start pointing at traditional rivals. Without clear answers, nations are essentially forced into taking preemptive defensive steps. One slight miscalculation and massive mutual defense treaties, we're talking NATO or major Eastern military blocs, are suddenly activated. This marks an absolute sea change in how superpowers clash. Traditional warfare, it relied heavily on proxy wars, physical borders, and localized combat. But today, we're living squarely in the era of hybrid warfare. The new front lines aren't trenches anymore. They are global choke points for oil, microchip supply chains, space domains, and complex digital networks. When diplomacy completely fails and extreme economic sanctions are thrown on the table, superpowers suddenly find their direct, most vital interests on the line. They aren't fighting through proxies anymore. They are staring right at each other. Orders get sent out from underground command centers. Aircraft carriers pivot, strategic bombers take to the skies, and the world as we know it simply stops. Moving on to phase two, economic collapse and the clash.
At this point, the conflict violently bleeds from the digital shadows straight into the physical world, and the speed at which this unravels would be absolutely breathtaking. Experts have been warning us about hybrid warfare for years, and in this scenario, it hits the civilian population instantly. Just consider the immediate fallout here. In the first few days, the entire global economic system unravels. Vital maritime corridors are shut down, instantly killing the supply chains that literally feed the planet. Oil and gas stop flowing to factories and power plants. Global stock markets plunge straight into the red and are forced to close their doors just to prevent absolute zero. Paper currency rapidly loses its value, panic floods the streets, and within mere hours, supermarkets are entirely empty to food. And the crazy thing? This mass civilian panic happens before the conventional military fighting even reaches its peak.
That leads right into part three, space war and lawfall.
As the global economy flatlines, the theater of battle violently expands. We enter a phase where the fighting stretches from the absolute crushing depths of our oceans, all the way up into outer space. The technological scale of this conflict is staggering. It's totally unprecedented in human history. Deep beneath the surface, advanced submarines engage in a silent war, intentionally severing those massive undersea internet cables that connect our continents, digitally isolating entire regions of the globe. Up above, the skies are filled with lightning-fast dogfights between 5th and 6th generation stealth fighters, all while hypersonic missiles traveling at speeds that make them virtually unstoppable, are raining down on air defenses, military bases, and critical command and control centers.
This incredibly quickly builds into a literal Star Wars scenario. Some of the most critical strikes happen right in the cosmos. By targeting and destroying orbiting satellites, military forces are trying to blind their enemies. But in doing so, they essentially blind the entire world. The global GPS network completely collapses. Commercial aviation and maritime navigation paralyzed. International communications are severed. Even the smartest of smart missiles suddenly lose their precision guidance. The world just goes completely dark and totally blind.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this. When a war reaches this kind of massive scale, it transitions into an existential war. The global powers involved realize their absolute fundamental survival is on the line. There's no room for retreat anymore, no room for half measures. In this desperate stage, international law essentially evaporates. Organizations like the United Nations become completely powerless to enforce any kind of resolution. Those carefully crafted diplomatic red lines that took decades to establish, they vanish, one by one. Leaders are backed into a corner in their fortified bunkers. Their conventional arsenals are rapidly depleting, and their options are shrinking by the absolute minute.
Which brings us to the fourth phase, the nuclear point of no return. This is the gravest, most terrifying phase of this anatomy, the absolute point of no return. When a nuclear-armed superpower feels a true existential threat to its capital or its ruling regime, the whole concept of nuclear deterrence stops being a political theory and shifts into grim reality. This is exactly how the irreversible escalation happens. It often kicks off with the authorization of tactical nuclear weapons. These are smaller yield bombs designed to be used directly on the battlefield to punch through advancing military lines. But military doctrine dictates that the very second that first nuclear blast occurs, the ultimate taboo is broken. The opposing side is not going to wait. They will respond immediately and with significantly greater force. The nuclear briefcases are opened. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, are launched from underground silos and stealth submarines hiding in the dark corners of the oceans. Carrying multiple warheads each, these missiles tear through the sky, traveling way faster than the speed of sound toward their targets, major capitals, industrial hubs, and dense population centers.
Within mere minutes, they make impact. And the visceral horror of these strikes is almost beyond our comprehension. These blasts generate temperatures of millions of degrees. We are talking hotter than the surface of the sun. Entire cities are quite literally vaporized in a matter of seconds, steel and concrete turning instantly to ash. The immense pressure and shockwaves level absolutely everything for kilometers in every direction, igniting massive, unstoppable firestorms that consume vast stretches of land.
Leaving us at part 5, Nuclear Winter and Dark Age.
But the terrifying reality is that those initial explosions are just the beginning. As the immediate fires burn out, a new, agonizing chapter begins for those who somehow survived the strikes. It's a creeping, environmental death. We really have to contrast the immediate, localized destruction of the warheads with the silent killers that follow. The millions who survive that initial blast wave will immediately face radioactive fallout. Carried by high-altitude atmospheric winds, this lethal radiation can easily travel thousands of kilometers from the blast zone, silently and relentlessly contaminating the air, the drinking water, and the very soil we need to survive. And then comes the cosmic catastrophe. All of that black smoke, dust, and ash from the burning cities and forests, it's going to rise all the way up into the stratosphere. It will form a dense, impenetrable black belt around the Earth, blocking out up to 90% of the sun's rays for years. This is what triggers a nuclear winter. Global temperatures will violently plummet. Crops worldwide will completely fail, and the resulting global starvation will ultimately claim far more human lives than the blasts themselves. Humanity will face its darkest days, both literally and metaphorically. When the dust finally settles, the old world is completely gone. There are no superpowers left, no global economies, no internet. Everyone is suddenly equal in the destruction. Major cities become totally radioactive forbidden zones. National borders, those invisible lines that humans fought over for centuries, become utterly meaningless. The survivors will find themselves thrust into a new dark age, basically regressing to a tribal fight for survival where the absolute most valuable commodities on Earth are a can of sterile food or just a bit of uncontaminated water. And because all of our modern knowledge is stored digitally or on highly perishable paper, thousands of years of human technological progress could be largely erased, leaving us with only what can be passed down by word of mouth. Now, this explainer isn't about perfectly predicting a definitive future. It's about deeply understanding the extreme fragility of the civilization we've built. The brilliant physicist Albert Einstein actually summarized this exact anatomy of escalation perfectly. He said, "I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." World peace isn't just some naive political slogan, guys. It is quite literally the only lifeline preventing humanity from writing the final, devastating chapter in our history book. So the question remains, what will it take for us to ensure those digital dominoes never start falling?